Willkommen. Welcome. This is a lecture 11, German and Alpine music. So let's look at the Alpine region and Central Europe. The Alps, of course, are one of the largest mountain ranges in Europe, and they're right above Italy, or I should say north of Italy, and south of Germany, and include many different countries. In the region of Central Europe, which encompasses Germany, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, Austria, Slovenia, and Switzerland, is a very important musical area. And the Celtic influence and the Viking influence was very important, but we're going to see that it's also the Italian influence and music from all around Europe kind of coalesced in this area. And so the Alpine region is outlined in the purple, and it really covers parts of all of these countries. Now, I'm not going to go into classical music. We would do that in a different course. We're going to look at the folk music in this region. It's very, very important for us to understand that German folk music is kind of a generic term. It's a general term. And mostly it's Alpine, meaning the whole region, and all the music influences each other. It's not just German. But let's begin with looking at a very interesting concept. It's called German Volksmusik, or the people's music. Folk meaning the folks, and music. So it's the music of the people, which we would call today pop music. So there are several related styles of traditional folk music from the Alpine regions of Central and Northern Europe. And they include these countries, as I mentioned, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Slovenia, the Czech Republic, and South Tyrol, which is the northern part of Italy and the southern part of Western Austria. Originally, all this music was transmitted by oral tradition. It wasn't written down. And the oldest historical records of this go back to the 16th century. Now, of course, the music is recorded and written down, and it's still passed on generation to generation by players and singers and dancers. So Volksmusik is characterized by improvisation and variation, uncomplicated major key melodies and simple harmonies. In other words, it is pop music. And the typical instruments that we would look at are alphorns, Hochbretts. Hochbrett is a hammered dulcimer. That's the German name for it. Zithers, which come from harps originally. Acoustic guitars, which come from the Gitarren. Violas, which comes from the viola braccia from Italy. And harmonicas. And these instruments, along with accordions, make up the bulk of the instrumentation that's used in this Alpine music. So let's start with the Hochbrett. The Hochbrett is the hammered dulcimer. Now, we've seen this in several other cultures, in French music, in Spanish music, but it really became popular in the Alpine regions. And it's a percussioned string instrument. Now, percussion meaning you use little hammers to hit the strings, and you've seen this before. And it's a trapezoidal shape. That's the trapezoid-shaped body of it, which allows for the strings to be long at one end and shortened at the other end. And it's very strong in structure because of that. The hammered dulcimer is set before the musician, who in more traditional styles may sit cross-legged on the floor, or in a more modern style may sit or stand at a wooden support with legs. And what's really important with this is it is the precursor for the piano. You can see the piano strings and hammers set up and dampers and compare them with a hammered dulcimer, and they're completely related. The other instrument that's closely related to this and goes way back to ancient Egypt is the zither. And it comes from the Greek word cithara, from which the modern word guitar also derives. So it kind of looks like a guitar, but it has many strings, and it is played with a plucking sound with fingers and with picks. We've seen this in Greek music and in the Middle Ages, and it actually comes out of that cittern family. And it's this flat body, and it's played like what's known as a psaltery, which goes way, way back into the Middle East. And it's a beautiful sounding instrument, and it's been actually written for classical music as well. Then we'll look at the alphorn. And the alphorn is related to the lure that we looked at in the last lecture. And it consists of a straight, several meter long wooden natural horn. It's about 12 feet long. Conical bore means cone-shaped, with a wooden cup-shaped mouthpiece. It's used by mountain dwellers in the Swiss Alps and the Austrian Alps, Bavarian Alps in Germany, the French Alps, and elsewhere. We think it was a signaling instrument because when one plays it, you can actually hear this for miles. I play alphorn and used to play up at Oktoberfest at Snowbird, Utah, and we would go to the top of the mountain and play songs. There were like 2 or 3 of us that would actually play in harmony. There's a wonderful video of an alphorn group playing. Then the guitar and lute guitar. Now we've seen these in all the cultures that we've studied up to this point. The only difference is that the lute guitar is kind of a hybrid. It's kind of a combination of the two. And so they have a lute style, which comes from the Middle Ages. It's still played in folk music today. And then guitars are made frequently with a real decorative style. Now that's true in almost every culture that has guitars. And the German guitars are crafted with very special and idiosyncratic styles. And then the viola. Now the viola is larger than the violin. It comes from the viola da braccia in Italy, meaning played on the arm. It's bigger than the violin, and it's a lower sound. And it's used along with the violin or the fiddle in folk music, but it's slightly lower, and it has a really wonderful sound and blends perfectly with the folk music of the Alpine regions. And finally, we have the accordion. And the accordion is one of the most important instruments in the history of music, believe it or not. It helped teach folk cultures a tuning system that was adopted by Johann Sebastian Bach back in the 1600s that regulated music throughout Europe. And there are 3 types: the concertina, which is very small and uses buttons; the button-style accordion, which doesn't have piano-like keys, it just has buttons; and then the keyboard style. And it's believed to have been invented in around 1822 by Christian Friedrich Ludwig Buschmann. And what's interesting about this is that it's a bellows system. If you'll remember the water organ from Greek, where you had to pump to get the air to move, it's just a portable version of that ancient Greek organ, except it blows the air across strips of brass or steel called reeds, and that they vibrate, and it innervates all the sound in the sound box. And there's a great video of a virtuoso accordion player. Then yodeling is very important. It's a singing style, of course. I'm going to demonstrate a little of this in class before you watch the video. I actually am singing on one of the tracks. I'm a harmony yodeler on one of the tracks that you'll be watching, the video tracks. And yodeling is really a rapid change between what's known as chest voice and high-pitched head register. And so there's an oscillation back and forth between the middle voice and the high voice. And the word comes from jodeln, which means to utter the syllable yo. It looks like Joe when it's spelled out in English, but the German pronunciation of J is like our Y, yeah. So yo means that yodel technique, and you'll hear some great yodeling. And it's done by men and women. And it is another signal kind of system, but also now an art form in and of its own. And it's used worldwide in many, many different cultures. And it is a natural variation of just singing. Then we'll look at some German and Alpine dancing. The first one is the polka, and originated in the Czech Republic. It's a dance that's familiar throughout Europe and America. And it originated in the middle of the 19th century in Bohemia, which is part of the Czech Republic now. And the word comes from pulka, meaning half, referring to the short half steps featured in the dance. And it's very popular still today in the United States. Then we have the Schuhplattler, and the Schuhplattler means the shoe, hitting the shoe with the flat hand. and hitting the legs. And this is thought to go back about 3000 BC. And it's a dance containing leaps and hand gestures. And it was a way for men to show off their prowess and coordination, and kind of a courtship dance. And the performers stomp, they clap, and they strike the soles of their shoes. That's the Schuhe in German. Their thighs and knees with their hands held, like I said, flat. It's pretty fun to watch. And then the Ländler. The Ländler is a partner dance which features some hopping and stamping. Now, we've seen this in many cultures, and you'll see it around the world. It might be purely instrumental, or have a vocal part, sometimes featuring yodeling. And when the dance halls became popular in Europe in the 19th century, the Ländler was made a little faster and a little more elegant. So along with several other folk dances from Germany and Bohemia, it's thought that this is the precursor to the waltz. And then we have the Walzer, or the waltz. And in transition from country to town, the hopping of the Ländler became known as the Langhaus. A famous sliding step and gliding rotation replaced the stamping. And that shocked people when it first was introduced, because the dancers were actually touching almost cheek to cheek. And it was scandalous when it first began, but it spread to many other countries. And finally, we have folk wind bands. The typical instruments are the trumpet, the trombone or baritone horn, the tuba, and the clarinet. Sometimes an accordion, sometimes drums are added. But these are very, very popular, and we have a great video for you to watch on that. And lastly, you're going to notice a costume, and the costumes are Lederhosen and Dirndl. Lederhosen, pronounced Lederhosen, means leather pants. And these are Bavarian, and that's the natural resource of a lot of materials that they use in the Alpine region. And then the Dirndl simply means a young woman's dress. They're worn at Oktoberfest and worn at various ceremonies, and especially on stage, and by dancers in certain plays. So check Canvas for the videos to watch, take the quiz, and wir sehen uns in der Klasse. Auf Wiedersehen.